Science to the Aisle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, reviews of The Normal Heart, Jerusalem, The Mother with the Hat, and Baby It's You. Gentlemen, welcome. Good evening, I'm Charles Gross.
And I'm Leslie Hoban Blake. Good evening.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to start tonight with a show that we actually talked about a little earlier this season. Leslie went to see The Normal Heart, and she paid for tickets because she said, I'm never going to get to see it with this cast.
Right.
Well, you were sort of right, but in actuality, the play was so well received that most of the cast, intact, has now moved to a regular Broadway run.
Well, that's thanks to Darryl Roth, the very forward-looking producer who was able to get that kind of money together and bring an enormous cast to a Broadway theater, which I never would have thought possible. When the show was done originally in 1988, it was downtown at the Public, and everybody got...
So this is Broadway debut?
Broadway debut, and well-deserved and really, and just as timely as ever, which is, I think, a sad commentary on our life. But let me say why that's so. Normal Heart is a play about the mishandling of the AIDS crisis in terms of the medical profession, in terms of the newspapers, in terms of anybody getting word out as to what was going on and what was happening with this particular crisis. And
you have to tell gay men to stop having sex.
Sorry, what?
Somebody has to. Why not you?
Well, wouldn't it be better coming from you? It's a preposterous request.
It only sounds harsh. You wait a few more years, it won't sound so harsh.
You realize you are talking about millions of men who have singled out promiscuity to be their principal political agenda. The one that they would die before abandoning. How do you deal with that?
You tell them they may die.
You tell them.
I'm very interested in setting up some sort of services for the patients. We've got to start thinking about them.
Who's he?
He heard about you, and he found you, and here he is. My name is Tommy Boatwright. And why don't you write that down? It's Tommy Boatwright. In real life, I'm a hospital administrator. And I'm a southern bitch.
You made me sound like I'm the enemy.
I'm beginning to think that you and your straight world are our enemy. I'm furious with you. And with myself, and with every goddamn doctor who ever told me I'm sick and interfered with my loving a man. I'm trying to understand why nobody wants to hear that we're dying. Why nobody wants to help. Why my own brother doesn't want to help. $2 million for a house? We can't even get 29 cents from the city.
You've been refusing to see her for weeks. He was furious with me when I waltzed in with her, and it was a real weeper, Mama holding her son, and he's dead now. There are going to be a lot of mamas flying into town, not understanding why their sons have suddenly upped and died from pneumonia.
Larry Kramer, who wrote the play and is in the play as the lead character, Ned Weeks, had had enough. He just couldn't sit by idly while friends of his and ultimately a lover of his became ill and then died. And so he started the gay men's health crisis in real life and wrote this play in 1988 to show who was responsible in his way of thinking for all of this. And the new set is just names of
ever increasing names.
Well, it actually, I say that wrong. I'm not quite sure what you call it, but it's pressed paper, and it's a timeline, which ultimately they shine some light on it. But it's a timeline from the beginning of the crisis, as we know it, to the end of the time when the play is on, and when that comes down, it's names. And I asked about how the names were chosen, and they were names of people the cast knew that and the company knew. So they were all names that. I mean, there were also famous names, but... So anyway, that's what this is about. And within this, we have the Broadway debut of Ellen Barkin, the return to the stage for the first time in 18 years of Joe Mantello, who's
so this is his first... as a director.
Well,
and is this his first play since Angels in America?
First play since Angels in America. And
not to be confused with the version that we saw earlier this season.
No, the original Angels in America, after which he became a director, and it's such a director that for Wicked and Take Me Out, he's won a couple of Tonys. And he never intended to go back to the stage. And there's a big article in the Times, and you can read that online about why he chose to do this. He always wanted to play with Ned Weeks. He saw this when he was a 22-year-old kid coming to New York for the first time, and the play blew him away, and it showed him what theater could do. Because it's not only educational, as you once pointed out to me, it's also entertaining. And so when the two things come together in this kind of, and as I say, and the sad part of it is that it's still relevant. Because even today there are, not necessarily to this particular issue, but any issue that doesn't get featured the way it should at the time when it's, when it's a timely fashion and some good can be done. It's fine to do something 5 years later for some people, but what good does that do to the people, who are at the...
Well, I'll tell you, the interesting thing is two things. I was actually reading an article in the New York Times this morning by a doctor who had covered the AIDS crisis in the early day, and he says, the progress we've made in the past 20, 25 years regarding AIDS is incredible. May not do any good to the people who died of it early, but if you compare how far we've come, there's another article about Magic Johnson, who's been HIV positive for decades, and he is surviving and thriving, and how far we've come. We still don't have a cure, and we don't have anything that prevents, but you compare it to, say, cancer,
Right.
and how little progress we've made, and that's been around for hundreds of years. We actually have made an amazing amount of progress with this disease, quite a bit to go. What I found interesting about Normal Heart, number one, it is a very entertaining play. You've got some good characters. I will tell you, Ned reminds me a little of Lewis in Angels in America during the second half. Slightly Woody Allen, because he's a little nebbishy at the end, but that disappears very quickly. I think he's a much more watered down version of Larry Kramer.
Well, in terms of Larry Kramer,
in terms of yes.
Although I must say we saw him at the Drama Desk Awards and he was very happy.
Well, I think Larry's mellowed over the years.
But he was standing outside of the play, handing out leaflets to people saying, "Thank you for coming to see my play. Don't imagine it's over. It isn't over."
It certainly is not, but we have come a long way. And I think he must be feeling, one of the reasons he's so calm is he must be feeling very vindicated.
I would think so.
Because most of what he said in the play, we have to get the word out. It's not, just a gay disease. We have to stop having promiscuous sex. That's a major thing. To say that to the homosexual community or to the gay community, and you didn't even say gay back in the early '80s.
But here's the thing. I mean, it's the doctor in this, played by Ellen Barkin. Her name is
Very
Emma
well.
Bruckner here. I think it's Matilda Krim, but I'm not sure. I don't want to say that and then be wrong. But she's the one who says, "Go out and tell people." To the Ned Weeks character, go out and tell them. He says, "How can I tell them that? How can I be?"
Well, he tries.
But his anger also got him kicked out of the very organization, the Gay Men's Health Crisis, that he founded or co-founded. He can't get along with anybody. No. And they kick him out, and then he starts another one. I think you said it was called Out.
Where basically what the intent was to expose people who were gay, bring them out of the closet, whether they wanted to be or not. In fact,
which is not
some of the interesting things that you might even find quaint today is that you have several characters, one who works for Citibank, for example, who's a major part of the organization, but doesn't want people to know he's gay.
That character is played by Lee Pace, who's best known for Pushing Daisies, which is a wonderful television show, and a couple of movies. And he's very tall and very imposing, and he's got this fabulous 70s, late 70s, early 80s haircut.
Yes.
And he's adamant about not being pulled out of the
Well,
closet.
it was a very, people don't appreciate how much harder it was to be gay 25 years. Now we're talking about, let's push marriage. Well, they weren't trying to push marriage back. They were trying to basically say, let us exist.
There have been many younger gay people who've come to the various cast members and to Larry Kramer and said, "Thank you so much. I didn't know. I really didn't know." And it's interesting because you don't. I guess if you're 25 years old now, what would you know about what happened 25 years ago? And it's an important thing to revisit because the whole thing about history is what keeps happening if you don't.
Well, one of the interesting statements that Ned makes at the beginning of the play is, we were silent during the Holocaust, and look what happened.
Well, I think it's a relevant.
Absolutely. I think the play is still relevant. It is still entertaining. It is beautifully done. Joel Grey directed the original limited version. George C. Wolfe stepped in because Grey was busy doing Anything Goes.
They're given co-directorship because Joel Grey did the casting, the initial casting. The only new members besides Lee Pace and Ellen Barkin is, I think, Jim Parsons
from The Big Bang Theory, who has a relatively small role.
But it's a very telling role.
Yes.
He's a very Queenie character.
Yes,
Very,
you notice him because you know him from TV, but even if you were not familiar with his Big Bang Theory, you would still say, hey, you know, this guy's up and coming,
Right,
except that
right.
he's
He's already
already there. So your final thoughts?
Oh, I've seen it 3 times now. Once as a reading and twice this production, and I don't know how they do it 5 times a weekend because it is so enervating and energizing at the same time, and the amount of energy that Joe Mantello expends. The Drama Desk gave it an ensemble award, called it, that everybody is equal,
Right.
but the Tonys singled out Joe.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see.
Well, I
whether or
did
not
want to mention the actor who plays Ned's lover,
John Benjamin Hickey.
John Benjamin Hickey, who is, you know, I was wondering, you see him in the early and the advanced stages of it, and I wonder how they're going to do this because the disease can be so
well,
devastating,
so well.
and they portray it so beautifully. He looks, you could see this
Yes.
handsome man at the
Yes.
beginning of the play, and this skeleton
And
at the
here's an
end.
interesting thing too.
Okay.
Joe directed John in Love, Valor, Compassion, and they're also happy to be back together. And it's just it's an
So
amazing.
we have representatives from all the, except for Torch Song Trilogy, all the quintessential gay plays over the last 25 years,
I guess.
like a 6 degrees of separation.
Okay.
So I am assuming you will give this 5 stars.
I will give this 5 plus.
I would go more for 4, but I did enjoy it.
Highly recommended.
Okay.
Okay.